you're looking to cut through the noise, yeah. To really get a handle on the big, complex stuff shaping our world.
Mm-hmm.
To go deep, understand what really matters, and, do it without spending ages wading through jargon.
Exactly. And if that's you, you were definitely in the right place.
So today we're diving into the artificial intelligence arms race. It's a fascinating and maybe really pivotal competition happening right now.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about who has the coolest new gadget. It's this global scramble.
Right.
Nations racing to develop and, crucially, deploy advanced AI, especially for military purposes.
Okay.
And the material we've dug into for you looks at both that military side and the wider tech and economic battles in AI. We're focusing a lot on the U.S. and China, naturally.
Yeah, they seem to be the main players. And we've got a good mix of sources for you, a solid overview from Wikipedia, plus some really sharp articles from Forbes and Unite.ai.
Right, a blend of background, economic angles, and tech race perspectives.
Our mission here is pretty straightforward. Pull out the key stuff, the surprising bits, those aha moments, but keep it clear, keep it manageable.
Yeah, no getting bogged down.
Yeah.
We want you to come away with a real sense of the dynamics, what's at stake, and how different countries are approaching this whole AI thing.
Okay, let's start there. When we say AI arms race, what are we actually talking about? What does that mean?
Well, in the military sense, the sort of core idea is this competition to build and use lethal autonomous weapon systems. Laws, for short.
Gomez. Right.
These are AI systems that can find and, well, engage targets without a human directly pulling the trigger, so to speak.
Okay. You hear those scarier terms too, right? Like killer robots.
Exactly. Slaughterbots, killer robots, those grab headlines. But the idea of the arms race is actually broader.
How so?
It's really any big national push for AI superiority. Could be for military power, could be for economic dominance, or both.
Gotcha.
And yeah, it's often talked about as a potential AI Cold War, especially between the U.S. and China.
And when did that start heating up?
A lot of experts point back to around 2010. And it's definitely still going strong.
Yeah.
Huge investments pouring in from both sides.
So this isn't some future scenario. It's been building for, what, over a decade?
Yeah.
When did we really see that shift?
Yeah, the early 2010s were key. You saw global military spending on robotics was already climbing. It hit about 5.1 billion US dollars in 2010, then up to 7.5 billion by 2015.
Wow.
But then China's AI research really took off mid-decade. That sped things up dramatically.
No, dramatically.
Well, by 2016, China was publishing more AI research papers than the entire EU.
More than the whole EU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that same year, they also pulled ahead of the US in terms of how many of their papers were in that top 5% most cited group. So quality and impact were growing too.
That's a pretty significant shift in the research world. What about the researchers themselves? Where were they based?
That's revealing too. If you look at a major AI conference like Tryout,
Yeah.
in 2017, researchers from Chinese institutions made up 23% of the presentations. That was way up from just 10% back in 2012.
Doubled their presence, basically.
Pretty much. At the same time, the U.S. share actually dropped from 41% down to 34%. And you had people like Eric Schmidt, big tech figure, saying back in 2018 that China would probably lead in AI by 2025.
Okay, so the race is on. It's intense. It's been building. But what are the real dangers here? It can't just be about bragging rights.
No, definitely not. The risks are serious and pretty varied. One big worry is safety.
Safety, how so?
Well, there's pressure to be first, to get that edge. It could lead developers to cut corners on safety testing.
Right, rush things out.
Exactly, which increases the risk of failures, glitches, unintended consequences, and in a military context, that could be, well, catastrophic.
Yeah, you don't want glitches in weapons systems.
Precisely. And some argue that just calling it a race encourages that dangerous mindset, speed over safety.
That makes sense. What other kinds of risks are people worried about?
Another huge one is losing control, especially as AI gets smarter, maybe approaching what people call artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
AGI, right. Human-level intelligence.
Or beyond. And that raises really deep questions about whether we can actually manage AI that advanced, predict its behavior, existential risks, basically.
That sounds pretty scary. There was that story about the U.S. Air Force simulation, wasn't there? Where the drones supposedly went rogue?
Yeah, that report caused a stir. It was later retracted, clarified as a thought experiment, I believe, but it tapped into those deep fears, didn't it?
It really did.
Beyond that, you've got the risk of too much power, too much tech advantage, ending up in the hands of just one country or group.
Geopolitical imbalance.
Right. And then there are threats like AI being used to attack critical infrastructure, or to turbocharge disinformation campaigns.
Making fake news even more convincing and widespread.
Potentially, yeah. And some even worry it could mess with nuclear deterrence, make things less stable.
Okay, those are some heavy potential downsides. Let's dig into what the main players are actually doing. We keep mentioning the US and China. What are their specific strategies? Let's start with the US.
Okay, the U.S. has seen AI coming as a game changer for a while. Back in 2014, you had Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel talking about the third offset strategy.
Third offset.
Yeah, basically identifying key technologies for future warfare, and AI was right there at the top.
So they flagged it early. Has
Right.
that translated into spending?
Oh, yeah. DoD spending on AI, big data, cloud computing that jumped from about $5.6 billion in 2011 to $7.4 billion by 2016.
And that's just military spending.
That's DoD. Private sector investment is way bigger, reportedly around $70 billion a year by 2018.
1 billion.
Yeah. And then a big report in 2019 from the National Security Commission on AI basically said AI is absolutely critical for the U.S. to maintain military superiority.
So it's official strategy, backed by serious money. Any concrete examples of U.S. military AI projects?
Sure. One well-known one is the Sea Hunter. It's an autonomous warship,
A robot ship.
pretty much, designed to operate for months at sea without a crew, doing things like tracking submarines. It could even navigate itself in and out of harbors.
Wow. But what about the lethal side? Are there rules about autonomous weapons?
There are. The DoD put out a directive, it was temporary initially, I think back in 2017, requiring a human in the loop for any system that uses lethal force.
Meaning a person has to make the final decision to fire.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And the Defense Innovation Board also came up with ethical principles for AI, emphasizing human oversight, needing to understand why the AI is making certain recommendations, looking inside the black box, as they put it.
Okay, so there are some guardrails, at least in policy. What about getting AI actually into use in the field?
That's where organizations like JAIC come in, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. Its whole job is to speed up AI adoption across the DoD, including for combat stuff.
Okay.
And you see commercial tech potentially crossing over too, like Microsoft pitching DALL-E, the image generator, for battlefield management.
Using AI to understand the battlefield better.
Right. And OpenAI, huge name in AI, dropped its ban on military use early in 2024. That was a significant move.
Definitely. What about specific programs focused on combat data?
Project Maven is a big one. Started in 2017. It uses machine learning to analyze drone video feeds in real time.
So AI watching the videos instead of humans.
Helping humans, yeah. Tracking things, tagging potential targets automatically. Apparently, seeing China's progress in similar areas was part of the motivation for starting it. It's not designed as a fully autonomous weapon, more about battlefield awareness.
Gotcha. And more recently, anything tied to current conflicts?
Yes, Project Artemis. That's a partnership with Ukraine.
Ukraine. Interesting.
Yeah, focused on developing advanced drones that can resist electronic jamming. The idea is to combine Ukraine's, battlefield experience and quick adaptation with drone tech.
Because they've become drone experts out of necessity.
Exactly. Combine that with U.S. precision engineering. It also shows how drone tech is spreading, becoming more accessible.
Okay, so the U.S. is definitely active. Let's switch gears to China. What's their playbook look like? It sounds different.
It is quite different. China's approach is very top-down, very strategic. It's driven by this national policy called military-civil fusion.
Military-civil fusion? What's that?
It basically means blurring the lines between the commercial tech sector and the military, leveraging innovations from private companies to modernize the People's Liberation Army.
So tech developed for consumers could end up in weapons.
Potentially, or adapted for military use, yeah. The goal is explicit. Achieve global AI supremacy, both economic and military. The leadership, Xi Jinping included, sees AI as absolutely fundamental to China's future power.
And how are they trying to achieve that?
A key part is rapidly adopting commercial AI to close any tech gaps they might have with other advanced militaries. And, they've had pretty good access to Western AI tech through Silicon Valley connections.
Right.
But also, they've had major homegrown successes, like Baidu's speech recognition breakthrough way back in 2015 was world-class.
So it's a mix of external access and internal innovation. Are they setting specific targets?
Oh, yeah. Beijing laid out a roadmap aiming for a $150 billion AI industry by 2030.
150 billion.
It's ambitious. And their defense procurement has changed, too. Before about 2013, the military mostly bought from big state-owned companies.
The usual suspects.
Right. But by 2017, they were increasingly sourcing stuff like drones and AI from newer private tech startups.
Interesting shift. So the private sector is key now.
Very much so. One analysis suggested most military AI suppliers now are private companies founded after 2010. It shows how dynamic their tech scene is.
What about their investment levels? We heard the U.S. figures.
China's estimated military AI spending is over $1.6 billion annually. Private AI investment was lower than the U.S. figure back in 2018, under $7 billion.
Correct.
But here's a key stat. In 2017, Chinese AI startups attracted almost half of all global venture funding in AI.
Half the world's total.
Almost half, yeah. And they've been filing patents like crazy, nearly 5 times as many AI patents as the U.S. It's a huge push on the IP front.
Wow. Okay, that's a massive focus. What about their stance on the rules, the ethics, law WS, for instance?
It's been interesting. Back in 2016, China put out a position paper. It questioned whether existing international law was really adequate for fully autonomous weapons.
So they raised concerns early.
They did. They were the first permanent UN Security Council member to formally do that.
Yeah.
But it's complex. Xi Jinping has also called for international cooperation on basic AI research.
Okay.
But Chinese officials have also worried aloud about AI drones, for example, accidentally starting a war if there aren't clear international rules.
So they see the risks too.
And they seem to.
Yeah.
Their military doctrine is now talking about intelligentized AI warfare.
Intelligentized. What does that mean?
It's about integrating AI deeply across everything: land, sea, air, space, cyber, for autonomous attack and defense, but also for things like cognitive warfare.
Cognitive warfare, like influencing thoughts and decisions.
That's part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's moving beyond just network systems to making AI a core force multiplier for decision-making, command, autonomous actions.
What kinds of systems does that involve?
Things like AI-driven command systems, better prediction for strategy, fusing tons of data for battlefield awareness, developing autonomous weapons like drone swarms, AI cyber tools.
So automating more aspects of warfare.
Right. They're reportedly working on things like wingman drones to fly with piloted jets, robotic ground troops, using AI to optimize logistics.
And the cognitive warfare part.
That involves using AI for psychological operations, maybe manipulating social media, information warfare.
That sounds quite sophisticated. Are they there yet?
Well, there's a lot of ambition there. Some Western analysts think they still face significant tech hurdles to make that full vision a reality, but the direction is clear.
Okay, U.S. and China are clearly the heavyweights, but you mentioned others are involved too. What about India?
India is definitely stepping up its game. They set up an AI task force in 2018, started military AI preparations in 2019.
What are they focusing on?
They've established centers for AI and robotics research.
Yeah.
They're working on offensive drone capabilities, using AI for intelligence analysis, surveillance.
So, similar areas to the others.
Yeah, and they're putting money behind it, allocating significant funds, deploying AI systems like swarm drones, using AI for logistics in tough terrain like high mountains.
Military robots carrying supplies.
Stuff like that, yeah. They're also developing autonomous combat vehicles, robotic surveillance, manned-unmanned teaming concepts,
Manned-unmanned teaming.
where piloted vehicles work closely with autonomous ones. India is also aiming to leverage its large private sector AI workforce by 2026.
Okay, India's active. What about Russia? Putin made that famous quote about ruling the world through AI.
Right, that quote got a lot of attention back in 2017. Russia's been vocal about its AI ambitions. Even back then, reports surfaced about them working on AI-guided missiles that could switch targets mid-flight.
That sounds advanced.
Yeah, and they stated a goal: 30% of their combat power from remote or AI systems by 2030.
30%. That's a lot.
It is. They're testing autonomous combat modules, like one from Kalashnikov using a neural net. They're investing in AI research organizations, similar to DARPA in the U.S.
What kinds of systems?
Lots of focus on autonomous vehicles: ground, air, sea, undersea. They talk about AI replacing soldiers and pilots eventually. They're testing unmanned ground vehicles, like the Narita, developing autonomous targeting for them. Also looking at AI for electronic warfare, like jamming that adapts automatically.
And they're using it now, right, in Ukraine.
Hugely. Both sides are, really. It's often called a drone war, and AI is augmenting drone capabilities significantly, things like navigating without GPS, coordinating swarms.
Ukraine's intelligence is using autonomous drones too.
Reports say Ukraine's defense intelligence uses them for long-range strikes, yeah. Ukraine's also massively ramped up its own drone production. And they use AI to analyze vast amounts of data, like intercepted Russian communications, using tools from companies like Palantir and their own systems like Delta.
So AI is a major factor in modern conflicts already. What about Israel? They're known for advanced tech.
Very much so. Israel uses AI extensively for military applications. Reports from the Gaza conflict mentioned AI systems like Gospel for identifying building targets and Lavender for identifying individuals.
AI identifying specific people as targets.
That's what's reported, with claims of high accuracy, though IDF personnel supposedly still make final decisions on engagement and collateral damage. They also have systems like the Harpy drone, an anti-radar drone that can autonomously search for and destroy targets.
A fire-and-forget autonomous weapon.
Essentially. And they're expected to advance further with things like unmanned ground vehicles for border defense.
Okay, so many active players. What's the situation in Europe? Are they unified?
Not really. The European Parliament leans towards wanting human control over lethal autonomous weapons, but the member states are pretty divided.
So no single EU approach.
It's difficult. Some key countries like France, Germany, Italy, Sweden are developing their own laws. Germany has a defensive system with autonomous capabilities. Italy plans to use more autonomous systems.
But others are against it.
Austria, for instance, has called for a ban. The UK opposed a ban back in 2015, but says it maintains human oversight. South Korea has a system, the Super Aegis Seisekid machine gun.
The robot gun.
Yeah, it can track and theoretically destroy targets miles away, autonomously. But it has manual safeguards. They aim for software that can tell friend from foe, civilian from military. That's the challenge.
A huge challenge. Okay, so it's clearly a global race on the military side, but you said it's broader than that, economic, technological. Oh, let's talk about that wider competition.
Absolutely. Because AI isn't just about weapons. It's about economic power, industrial efficiency, future technologies. And again, it really comes down to the U.S. and China as the main global contenders.
With Europe potentially lagging.
That's the concern some analysts raise, yeah. That Europe might become more of a bystander if things continue as they are.
And China's role has changed dramatically, right? From copycat to innovator.
Completely. That transformation is fueled by a few things. Massive amounts of data, a huge pool of AI talent now, and this really vibrant ecosystem of entrepreneurs and tech companies. Plus, they often focus on affordability, which helps AI spread faster.
But the U.S. still leads in top researchers.
In the absolute elite, yes. A 2023 stat showed 57% of the very top AI researchers were based in the U.S. But as we said, China leads in the sheer volume of publications and citations overall.
And their approaches are fundamentally different, you said. State-driven versus market-driven.
Exactly. China has this centralized state-orchestrated model. The government picks national champions, think Tencent, Alibaba.
Right.
And it floods them with resources, including massive amounts of data, even synthetic data, to train their AI models. Like Tencent's Hunyuan model trained on trillions of synthetic tokens. It's very coordinated.
Whereas the U.S.
It's much more free market, driven by private companies, venture capital. This leads to amazing breakthroughs for sure. Graham Allison at Harvard put it well. The U.S. often leads in the initial breakthroughs, but China might be faster at applying AI in real-world situations.
Okay. And we talked about the U.S. chip controls impacting China. How are they adapting?
It's definitely a hurdle for them, not having easy access to the top-end NVIDIA chips for training the biggest models. They're forced to use alternatives, like Huawei's chips, which are generally slower.
So it slows them down.
It likely does. But they're resourceful. Chinese companies are working hard on software tricks, optimizations, to get the most out of the hardware they do have. Look at DeepSeek's models. Very competitive performance, despite potential hardware constraints.
And investment-wise, the U.S. private sector is still way ahead.
Massively. U.S. private AI investment dwarfs China's and the U.K.'s. We're talking over $100 billion in 2024 for the U.S. compared to single digits for China and the U.K.
And that money fuels.
The big moonshots, right?
Yeah.
Like OpenAI's GPT-4o with its huge memory capacity, that takes serious cash. But some critics say the U.S. system is too fragmented compared to China's unified push. Martin Rasser mentioned the lack of a cohesive U.S. national tech strategy.
And Europe. Strong on ethics, but weak on business.
That's the stereotype, to some extent. They're definitely leaders in thinking about responsible AI. But they struggle with commercializing research, scaling up companies. There's a big R&D funding gap with the U.S., and they lose talent to Silicon Valley.
What about basic infrastructure, like power grids and data centers? Are those becoming bottlenecks?
They absolutely are. Big challenges on both sides. China's huge data centers guzzle energy, mostly from coal, which conflicts with their climate goals.
Right.
Plus, chip shortages drive up training costs. But those hardware limits also spur innovation and efficiency, as Ji Xiaokar noted.
And the U.S. has its own power problems.
Yeah, the demand from AI data centers is straining the grid. There are real worries about blackouts in places like California. And talent is another issue. A huge percentage of U.S. AI hires come from overseas, while China is graduating far more computer scientists.
What about Europe's infrastructure?
Their main challenge is fragmentation. Different rules in different countries make it hard for AI companies to scale across the continent.
It sounds like cost is becoming a weapon in itself in this race.
Definitely. Price is now a major battleground. You see companies like DeepSeek offering powerful models way cheaper than OpenAI.
Undercutting the leaders.
Exactly. And that forces everyone else to react. Baidu, Tencent, iFlytek, they've all slashed prices, offered free tiers. It's a cost war, really, aimed at getting more users, more market share. Alibaba Cloud even cited AI demand as a driver for their revenue growth.
So back to that Eric Schmidt prediction, China leading by 2025, dominating by 2030, does that still hold up?
Well, as we mentioned, recent Stanford data suggests the performance gap between top U.S. and Chinese models narrowed a lot by late 2024.
So it's closer now.
It seems closer. The consensus is shifting. Maybe it's not about one clear winner.
Okay, let's tackle that directly then. Who is winning the AI arms race? If we look at all these angles, it's the peacekeeping, military, economic, tech.
It's such a tough question because, like you said, it depends on how you measure winning. Some see it as this big test of systems, U.S. capital-driven innovation versus China's state-driven strategy.
And the U.S. strengths are?
The U.S. clearly had an early lead in the big breakthroughs, especially large language models, LLMs, and maybe the clearest path, conceptually, towards AGI.
Fueled by VC money and big tech acquisitions.
Largely, yes. That massive private investment of 2022, 2023 really pulled in global talent, funded the huge computing needs.
Plus the hardware advantage with NVIDIA.
That's huge. NVIDIA is U.S.-based, dominant in AI chips, and the U.S. government has restricted sales of the most advanced chips to China. That's the lever of control.
But the U.S. government isn't directing the overall effort.
Not the same way China is. It's much more hands-off, letting the private sector lead. Regulation tends to lag behind the tech, which some see as a weakness.
Okay. And China's approach to winning?
Is very strategic, very focused on national goals set out in plans like the new Generation AI Development Plan and AI+.
And those goals are?
Using AI for things like surveillance, internal security, managing society, but also, crucially, boosting economic competitiveness across industries.
And their metrics for success.
They point to leading in publications, patents, the sheer number of LLMs being developed, producing top AI researchers.
And the government actively helps.
Oh, yes. Subsidies for computing power, backing domestic chip companies, making it easier for strategic AI companies to go public.
But there are restrictions, too, on content.
Right. Generative AI in China has to follow strict rules about content, provide ideologically acceptable answers, and there are limits on data scraping.
Are their models actually being used commercially?
Yes. Models like Baidu's Ernie and Alibaba's Qin are gaining traction in the Chinese market.
So if you had to predict the outcome, not one winner.
Probably both and neither is the feeling. The U.S. likely keeps an edge in frontier research. The path to AGI, maybe. China might excel at applying AI broadly in factories, hospitals, farms.
What about the talent war? You said the U.S. attracts global talent.
That's a key U.S. advantage. Something like 42% of top AI researchers work in the U.S., many originally from China. But restrictive immigration policies could really hurt that edge.
So it's not just about tech, it's policy too. And ultimately, maybe cooperation is needed.
Many argue it's essential, especially on safety. U.S.-China collaboration might be crucial to avoid accidents or really catastrophic outcomes with advanced AI. This arms race could be win-win, or it could be lose-lose for everyone.
That leads us to the ultimate prize, maybe. AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. The race to build that must be intense.
Oh, absolutely. AGI is the holy grail for many researchers. AI with human-like thinking abilities, though the definition is fuzzy. Jeffrey Hinton prefers the term superintelligence.
And who are the main players in that specific race?
You've got the tech giants, mainly. Google through DeepMind and Google Brain. NVIDIA providing the essential hardware. Microsoft with its huge OpenAI partnership in Azure Cloud. OpenAI itself, obviously.
And Meta, Facebook.
They're all pushing hard for AGI.
They are. DeepMind's famous for AlphaGo, AlphaZero, AlphaFold, showing AI mastering complex games and science problems.
Google Brain developed key tools like TensorFlow and models like BERT and Lambda. Google also makes its own AI chips, PPUs. They're focused on versatile AI, even quantum computing.
And NVIDIA's role is mostly hardware.
Mostly, but also crucial software, CUDI, CUDINN, Tensorite. Their GPUs are the engine. And they partner everywhere, including with defense contractors like Booz Allen Hamilton.
Microsoft seems to be betting big on OpenAI.
Hugely. Integrating OpenAI's tech into everything,
Yeah.
Office, Windows, Bing search via their Azure AI cloud, is a massive strategic investment.
And OpenAI itself, with GPT.
They've moved incredibly fast. GPT-3, GPT-4, which is multimodal, DL-80 for images. Their CEO, Sam Altman, is very open about aiming for AGI, but training these models costs astronomical amounts of money.
Hence the Microsoft partnership. What about Meta?
Meta is also heavily invested in AGI, buying tons of NVIDIA GPUs, contributing open source tools like PyTorch and models like Llama, using AI for their social media and metaverse plans, though they face big challenges, like content moderation.
Are there other significant players in the AGI race?
Definitely. IBM has its watsonx platform aimed at enterprise AI. Amazon is huge in AI services through AWS, plus Alexa. Apple's taking a different approach, focusing on powerful AI that runs directly on your iPhone or Mac using their own custom chips.
So lots of competition,
Yeah.
but it's not just a tech challenge, right? There are hurdles.
Massive hurdles. Technical ones like getting AI to truly understand the physical world, something Jan LeCun talks about a lot.
Right, common sense reasoning.
Exactly. But also huge ethical and regulatory challenges. What does AGI mean for jobs? Privacy, human rights. Getting that right is critical.
Sam Altman talks about that alignment problem.
He does, aligning AGI development with human values and ethics, acknowledging the immense potential benefits, but also the serious risks. It's not just about building it, but building it responsibly for humanity's benefit. The race is really just starting.
Given all these risks, especially with military AI and AGI, what about international rules? Is anyone trying to regulate this?
There's a lot of talk, but progress is slow. It's a huge challenge for international law. You need new norms, technical ways to monitor things, experts talking, legal agreements. It's complex.
People have been warning about this for a while, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. Noel Sharkey was warning about an autonomous weapons arms race back in 2007.
2007.
Yeah. Miles Rundage thinks diplomacy can help manage the risks. In 2017, over 100 experts urged the UN to tackle LOWs.
Did the UN act?
Well, diplomats at the UN body that deals with conventional weapons, the CCW, couldn't even agree on a definition of low WS back then. Getting actual rules agreed upon seems very far off, according to folks like the Indian ambassador.
So lots of talk, little agreement, especially among the big powers.
Pretty much. By 2019, you had dozens of heads of state, Nobel winners supporting a ban on killer robots. But as of 2022, most major military powers were still against a binding ban.
Why against it if it's so dangerous?
Well, partly because they see strategic advantages. But also, many experts think a complete ban would be almost impossible to enforce. How do you detect if a weapon is truly autonomous? It's technically very hard.
So maybe focus on managing it instead of banning it outright.
That's one line of argument. A Harvard report suggested AI is as transformative as nukes, and you probably can't stop military AI expansion entirely. So focus on safety, managing the tech, like maybe banning AI dead man switches on nuclear weapons, for example.
What about reactions from outside government, scientists, tech leaders?
Huge concerns there, too. That 2015 open letter from the Future of Life Institute calling for a ban on LAWS.
The one signed by Hawking, Musk, Wozniak.
That's the one. Over 26,000 signatories, including thousands of AI researchers. They also made those short films, Slaughterbots.
Right, those were disturbing, showing how cheap swarm drones could assassinate people.
Exactly. Designed to shock people into action, promote a ban. And Professor Sharkey constantly warns these weapons could easily end up with terrorists.
It seems some tech companies are trying to distance themselves from military work, too.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. Some Western tech companies worry about losing access to the huge Chinese market if they get too close to the U.S. military.
Business reasons.
Partly. But also, some researchers, like Demis Hassabis at DeepMind, have expressed personal ideological opposition to military AI work.
And Google pulled back from Project Maven partly because of staff protests. Right?
Reportedly, yes. Employee concerns about the ethics played a big role in them not pursuing the follow-on work back in 2018. Shows the internal pressures within these companies.
Okay, this has been incredibly thorough. A real deep dive into this whole AI arms race phenomenon. Let's try to pull together the main threads before we finish.
Sounds good. So we've seen this intense global competition playing out. It's military, it's economic, it's technological.
Right.
The U.S. and China are clearly the main drivers, But they have very different strategies, market-led versus state-led. Huge amounts of money are flowing in.
And the risks are real safety shortcuts, loss of control, destabilization, plus that whole complex debate about regulation and ethics.
Exactly. And like we discussed, picking a winner right now, almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's moving too fast.
Yeah, the whole landscape is just shifting constantly. Opportunities and massive challenges side by side. For me, the real aha moment is seeing how tangled it all is.
Totally. The tech innovation, the economic rivalry, national security fears, the ethical questions, they're all feeding into each other.
And hopefully breaking it down like this helps you, our listener, make sense of it without feeling totally swamped by the complexity.
That's the goal. So as we wrap up, thinking about this breakneck pace of AI development, all the complexities we touched on, here's something for you to chew on.
Okay.
What do you think is the single most critical factor that's going to shape where this AI arms race goes next and what its impact on the world will be? Is it purely the speed of the tech breakthroughs?
Yeah.
Is it our ability to create strong ethical rules and international agreements? Or is it maybe finding ways for these rivals to actually cooperate on managing the risks?
Finding that balance between innovation, ethics, and cooperation.
Exactly. Something to really think about as this story continues to unfold.